ready?
Yeah, go.
Start the fun.
Fun begin.
The fun begins with, in the course of the Wenton King. Hello. Today we're doing, now you may be surprised what I'm going to show up here, because we're doing that. Well, actually, it's that one. Can't quite see. Not that one. That one. Blizzard of Ozz. Yes, Blizzard of Ozz. Back in 1970, when Sabbath were getting signed and being screwed, this guy called Don Arden came to their concerts and said, "I want to manage you." And they were like, "Oh my god!" And there was a whole sequence of events involving that. But for a brief time, they were in Don Arden's office, and Don Arden's daughter was there working on the reception, etc., etc. And you fast forward to 1975 or so, and they'd been massively screwed by management, probably screwed out of millions by this guy who had double-crossed Don Arden, actually, and got the Sabbath off him. But the direction of the band had gone a bit proggy. I think that's the best way to describe it, and certainly in retrospect, that's the way it looks. And Ozzy wasn't happy with that. Ozzy thought really they should go back to their original sound. You can understand it's very difficult for them to know what to do when they were so universally panned. Nobody liked them. Just the listeners liked them, but nobody talking about them liked them at all. Ozzy, I mean, there is an argument Ozzy was right, and that's certainly the prevailing attitude now, but to me, I mean, Sabotage and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath are utterly fantastic albums. Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die have some good stuff on them, but they're not fantastic albums. So, but around the time of Sabotage, Ozzy was wearing a t-shirt saying Blizzard of Ozz on it. So he had this idea right the way back then. And of course he left after Technical Ecstasy, didn't sell very well, but came back again out of fear, really. He didn't know what to do. But after Never Say Die, they got back with Don Arden again, properly this time. So Don Arden had got Sabbath, and they're in this house in LA, and it's ridiculous. Because they're just getting, I think, suitcases stuffed with coke delivered to the door, actually full of the purest whatever, and they're in a terrible state. Of course, Don Arden at the time was also managing ELO, who were hugely successful. So there was an element of him sort of starting to back away when he realises this isn't happening, this isn't working, and apparently furniture started disappearing from the house. He started to just. Tony Iommi supposedly would go to the record company and say, "Oh, this is coming on, new album. It's going to be good." And then not doing anything. There was nothing at all for months, and it came down to the argument is Ozzy just wouldn't do anything, and whilst none of them were doing very much, we know they had written some music. They had written Children of the Sea, the instrumental Children of the Sea without any vocals had been written, and they couldn't persuade Ozzy to sit up, even sit up. He was just, in a terrible state, and so the evil Tony Iommi sent Bill Ward to go and sack him, and it was agreed they had to do it. Something had to happen because otherwise they were never going to make an album. So Ozzy was sacked, and the opinion was this guy's useless. Get rid of him. No one wanted anything to do with him, and Sabbath went on and got Dio. And the moment Dio came into I think the garage where they were rehearsing in this house, and wrote Children of the Sea there and then, the whole thing. So it all turned around for them, and they had a huge hit with Heaven and Hell, and it was all no album, and everyone was happy. I assume a bit of time before that, though, Ozzy is under the impression that's the end of that, and he's just going to spend all the money and have all the drugs and the pizzas and just sit in a hotel somewhere and enjoy that while he can, until he has to go back on the docu. That was what he believed, and obviously now that seems so ridiculous. And is it really a matter of self-esteem, or is it really he was on drugs? There's a bit of that. And so Sharon was sent, I think just to go and give him a bill or something like that. I don't think she was sent to sort him out, but she sort of shouted at him and blah 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 and all that stuff, and then ended up managing him, etc. And for a long time they were rehearsing with the band. Initially he just got unknowns, I think. So he was sort of going through a process of just trying to play with people. Discovered a band. This is the Blizzard of Ozz band. This is the controversy, and it's supposed to be a band. And I think there's a bit of a disagreement, but I think Bob Daisy was first. I think Bob Daisy was brought in first, and they were trying to get guitarists stand in the booth and do some whittling. Is it good whittling? It's all right whittling. And Ozzy says, then they got Randy Rhoads in, and he couldn't believe how good he was. But the actual truth is really that Ozzy couldn't be bothered to listen to this guy, and the other guy was trying, come on, just listen to this guy, he's amazing. And Ozzy wanted to go to the pub, and so allegedly they left him in the booth whittling, and went to the pub. They just left him there. But again, that doesn't sound quite right. Was he there that long, just playing? It doesn't quite, I don't know, Obviously, at some point, Ozzy realised how good this guy was, Randy Rhoads. And that's a big part of this album we're going to talk about today, is as much about Randy Rhoads as it is about Ozzy. Yeah, and obviously Randy Rhoads had a huge influence on the 80s, on shredding, and he's associated with that, and associated with Malmsteen, but also associated with the sort of bland shredders that came after that. I think that's misunderstood a bit. And I've seen people say, well, he's not that good. What's so good about him? He's not as fast as blah blah and accurate and etc. But that's not really what's good about him. What's good about him is he's doing this neoclassical metal stuff, but it's got this rock and roll element to it. There's almost Chuck Berry technique, but not rubbish. Because Chuck Berry's terrible actually, but and neoclassical metal as well, and that's fantastic. That's gold dust. That is so, and I'm sure Ozzy recognised that this guy he got this amazing guy who actually already had a bag of riffs he'd already used in Quiet Riot, his previous band. Actually, if you listen to some Quiet Riot bootlegs, and I imagine albums, you'll hear the Goodbye to Romance, and you'll hear bits of this stuff that he reused actually. But they're great riffs. And Bob Daisley, whenever he came in, and he wrote all the lyrics. I believe Bob Daisley's 100% lyrics, allegedly, maybe. Ozzy wrote his melodies. Ozzy writes melodies. Don't downplay that. Ozzy writes melodies, and he's got that unique voice. And that's the only link with Sabbath. This is nothing like Sabbath at all. It's upbeat, so that makes it very kind of 80s, but it's not quite there yet. It's not poodle rock, certainly not. It is Nawabum, which must have been a very exciting time, because obviously, in a way, rock bands started giving the fans what they wanted, which was more straightforward music, definitely more straightforward, but also incredibly energetic. And I think that's erroneously associated with punk, which I don't think is really true, because there was already music like that before. Was Lemmy influenced by punk? No, of course he wasn't. It was a huge hit, and it's a great album, and it's generally regarded as Ozzy's best album. Pretty much universally, actually. Good songs. What was that, 10 minutes?
Yeah. 10 minutes of Ozzy.
Should have played it. Never mind.
Yeah, what can I say really? It feels sometimes when we're talking about Ozzy Osbourne, we're all, in my mind, we're always looking for the external influence, because I think we said it before, it's hard to actually picture Ozzy as being with it enough to actually write successful music.
Yeah.
But he's obviously got something, and maybe we sort of underestimate him. I personally see him as this balmy brummy, drug-addled, lots of crazy, reckless stories of his when he's out of his head.
Yeah,
it's hard to think. Well, how can this guy go and write a successful music? So, in my head, you listen to it and you're thinking, well, what's shaping this album? And obviously, you've got the Sharon thing in there. And wow, how heavily produced is this? It does seem like a album that's crafted in a different way to a Black Sabbath album. Black Sabbath, for my money, were a bunch of guys who got together to play the blues and ended up creating a new genre of music.
Mm.
And it was about the music. This is more about Ozzy's personality. He's got a very appealing personality, and I think the opening track. I don't know. I think it says it all really. It's very catchy. A very catchy song, and it says a lot about Ozzy's personality. I don't know if it is, because the tendency to think, well, Sharon's latched onto someone here who's got a bit of IP, whatever you want to call it, and transformed that into, and she spotted the way that the music's going, and has exploited that, as well as sort of marrying into it. But I'm not sure that's the truth.
I think that's the way it's painted, but Ozzy wanted to go in this direction before then. We know that, and I believe that. And I think somebody else said very astutely. I think this in that he wanted to be commercial, or he wanted to be accessible, but he didn't want to sell out. I think that really.
Yeah, and it's a real fine line.
Yeah.
That's what I'm listening for. How are they managing that line? And it really is quite fine. I mean, it's very hard in retrospect not to look at this and think of poodle rock, because that's what you think.
That's where it was going.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's the way Randy Rhoads would have gone.
Yeah.
If he hadn't gone into a neoclassical proggy thing or something.
But there is something. I think it's always pulled back by Ozzy's personality. Actually, no matter where they go, there's something really appealing about his personality. Or maybe to people like it, I don't know if that's generally the case.
Yeah. And people defend him because they see him as a great guy.
Yeah.
But not that doesn't matter really, does it? But really, he does have a real talent. He writes these melodies. They're his melodies, and they're brilliant melodies.
And whatever music he's playing, it always seems to. That's Ozzy. There's an element of Ozzy in everything he does, which is quite. But that's what makes a really successful musician. So they create something which is distinctly theirs. Which is enjoyable. And Ozzy manages that somehow, and it's kind of a mystery as to how that occurs, but it always seems to.
At the same time, there was an element of luck with this, because you remember he can't make music on his own.
No.
So that's why this was a band. He needed a band. He always needs a band, actually, but here this really was democratic in that sense at the start. That's why it might be why this album maybe is his best album in some ways, at least. Having said that, the production values of I don't think it was made very expensively. I bet Heaven and Hell was made for a fortune, and this was made very cheaply, and there's not a lot of difference now, really. But Heaven and Hell is more rounded. But I like the sound of it because it's chamber and very, very really clear. There's no reverb, so in that sense, it's not very 80s at all. But it is very Nawabum, actually, and that's great.
I just think it's a shame because, obviously, the biggest song on there is Crazy Train. Everyone knows that. But it kind of reinforces that image of Ozzy as sort of like crazy, drug-addled, sort of out of there, and it becomes sort of like a railroad almost.
Yeah.
Where sort of the Black Sabbath stuff, there is that element to it, and you know that people who follow Black Sabbath, they're going there to have a good time, but there's a sort of sense that this is about people going to the stadium off their heads, just shouting, going, coming out, oh, that was crazy, man, that's crazy.
Just having fun. And that's what was you say, having fun. But I'll tell you what's interesting, of course Bob Daisley wrote all the lyrics. Crazy Train, if you listen to much later live performances, he changes the lyrics ever so slightly to be about him. Now, I assume Bob Daisley saw the parallel, that it was also about Ozzy. But for me, it's more about Randy Rhoads than Ozzy. If you're a guitarist, it's always going to be about Randy Rhoads rather than Ozzy. And Mr. Crowley is my favourite Ozzy song. And I imagine a lot of people's favourite Ozzy song. It's hugely influential. So similar to Malmsteen, and even the massive ego of Yngwie Malmsteen, that he actually said, rather than saying, I thought of this first, he actually says, well, we both thought of it at the same time, kind of thing. Because they were definitely doing it at the same time, but he didn't nick it from Randy or anything like that. Also, Revelation and Steal Away, the thing at the end, that's great as well, particularly Revelation. But that's hugely influential on much more boring music. So where neoclassical metal went wasn't the way I would have liked it to go, sadly. It went into poodle rock, if you like, it fell in it somehow, which is a shame, because the early stages of that stuff is great.
I think Mr. Crowley stands out because it's the one song on there that isn't, or doesn't feel like it's about Ozzy. It's actually about something, and
it's actually about someone else.
And there's a link with Black Sabbath there. You could imagine sort of like it's
easy right.
Yeah. But even when you listen to it now, the organ at the beginning, it sounds very of its time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they're trying to simplify things without turning out. They're trying to keep it rock.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be esoteric weirdness. I haven't mentioned the other two members of the band actually. You've got Lee Kerslake from Uriah Heep on drums. That's really cool. But also, the keyboard player is Don Airey, I don't know if people realise this, but he did tour with Ozzy as well. I don't know how he did. He was still in Rainbow at this point, so I don't know how he did both, or I don't know. So it's quite funny that keyboard intro, which is so simple, is played by probably written by Randy. I think it's written on guitar, but it's actually Don Airy had to play that. So when he left the Ozzy band, he never had to play it again. It's quite fun. What a great album! I like it.
I think it just about straddles the border between poodle rock and decent music quite well.
Yeah. I mean, Goodbye to Romance, that's an Ozzyism. And remember, that was played live. I don't think he still plays it live, but it was played live into the 90s. I saw him in 95 and he was still playing it in every concert. How does he get away with that song? I mean, Changes is the big one as well, which I think is much better. But it's that same thing in that on paper, oh my God, but it's okay. And it's got a really good guitar solo actually as well.
Yeah.
So, eggs.
It's 3 eggs for me, I'm afraid. It's not a bad album, but I'm not going to...
You can listen to it again.
No, I'm not going to listen to it again.
Yeah, see, well, so you should put it like that. There's two... I'm a schizophrenic. There's two different people in me. The guitarist in me... Well, I mean, really, the guitarist in me should give it 6 eggs. But I'm not going to give it 6 eggs. But the songs, the music, all of it together is 4 eggs, I think, which is great. It's a great album. We'll be back next week, obviously, for Diary of a Madman. See you then!